years where he grew that program immensely and thrived, and I'm very fortunate that he did that because I inherited that program, and his kids are amazing, so hallelujah for that. And we also have Mr. Brennan Michaels here, who is working on a DMA.
Correct.
Yes, at Michigan State. Yay.
Yeah.
Currently conducts all of the choirs and ensembles at Bellevue Presbyterian, right?
Yep.
So brass, orchestra, choir, 100-person choir,
all the
of it.
things, yes.
So yeah, we're in for a real treat.
Yeah.
Take it away.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for being here this morning. Almost standing room only, but we do have a lot of seats still up here if you want to come up here. It's great to be back in the state, back in the warmth, so thank you again for being here this morning. Would you please start by standing up, introducing yourself to the person next to you, and sharing your favorite piece from this semester that you taught your students. Stand on up. Say hello.
Hi, I'm Brennan. Nice to meet you, Alyssa. Favorite piece?
Where are you at?
I did that. What a reach.
So what was your favorite piece that you sang?
High school music. I did an engagement.
Once we get to the holiday break,
It is a good one, yeah. Hi, I'm Brennan. Nice to meet you, Cecilia. Favorite piece?
Probably there's a new piece called Relevance.
That's great. I would say my favorite is another Santos piece called Sweet Rivers. Also, cool. Thanks for being here.
Okay, so hopefully you're able to glean off your colleagues and at least get one piece that's new for either next semester or for next year. And so now, you come to repertoire session, you've at least learned one new piece. So thanks for participating in that.
Yeah. So I would like to give my welcome. Again, just to reiterate, I currently work on my DMA at Michigan State, but I also recently took a position in Bellevue, Washington, in a big church out there. But my home is Arizona, so being in New Mexico kind of feels at least a little closer to home. So anyway, it's good to be back in the Southwest. So one of the things to kind of kick off this topic about repertoire and kind of Ryan and I's fascination with it, about 10 years ago, when we were in undergrad, we were lucky enough to be able to go to a clinic done by Dale Worland. If you know the name Dale Worland, just a great name in choral music. And he kind of, after a long career in music, he kind of started to boil the choral art down to what we would say are like 3 pillars of choral music, or 3 pillars of what makes a good choral ensemble. And he said, number 1, he said it could be the instruments or the choir. Number 2, it could be the repertoire. Or number 3, it could be the leadership. And what he means by that is the conductor. So he asked a bunch of us, there's a bunch of music ed majors, He said, if you were to pick out of those three things, what's the most important? Is it the choral instrument? Is it your choir and creating good tone with them, or how you audition them? Is it the repertoire that you do, the music that you pick for your choir, the programming that you do? Or is it the leadership, and specifically meaning, is it the conductor? Is the conductor maybe the most important pillar in creating a choral, a successful choral program? Because as the leader, you're teaching the students, you're picking the stuff and all that. So if I were to ask you all to raise your hand on which you think is the most important, if you had to like pick one of them as the most important, how many of you would say it's just the choral instrument and the choir and good tone? Okay. How about the repertoire that you choose? Okay. How about the leader, the conductor? The conductor's important. Okay, very good. And some of you just chose not to answer this morning. That's okay. I won't take it personal. Or you, I'm sure you think all of them are important, which they are. So what Dale Worland said is he said that the repertoire is actually the most important because the repertoire is or is not what your choir is. And that really hit me thinking that, if you are in a program that does all classical music, then that's what your choir is. You're a choir that does classical music. If you're a choir that does all Disney, then that's what your choir is. And from that, tone comes and your conducting leadership comes. So I just thought that was kind of an interesting thing. And it kind of started our discussions on how important is this repertoire that we pick? And how can we, as educators, choose appropriate repertoire to enhance the choral sound, the tone, and then also you as a leader.
So as Brennan mentioned, we've got our kind of three pillars here as far as relevancy, rapport, and rigor, and we're going to go through each one of them, talk a little bit about it. We found that this definition here really represented well what we thought is rapport. So I'll read it here for you. A close and harmonious relationship in which the people or groups concerned understand each other's feelings or ideas and communicate well. And we thought that was just a really salient definition, and as you can see, things get misrepresented pretty easily. And we always talk about how you're just the window as the conductor. Everything, the message needs to go through you back to the audience. And so if you don't communicate that message well to your singers, it might not go back to the audience as well. And so we've got kind of four ways to think about rapport in terms of repertoire. So the first one being
the self. And I think that picture, well, this one is pretty good too. There's nothing like having meetings and presentations, right? So even to go back to that picture that Ryan just showed about the two heads, I think so often when we think of rapport, we do think of it as two parties usually involved. But I think, how do you find rapport with yourself? How do you check in and build kind of a relationship with yourself? And the way that I usually boil it down to is especially in music, the listening self and the teaching self. So most of us, chose to come into music because of loving the music. And when you were in high school, or when you were in college, or if you sing in a pro choir or something, or a community course, there's a music education that you're getting when you listen to music, when you perform music. And sometimes that comes at odds with your teaching self. Maybe you teach middle school, and so obviously you're not going to do a piece that you did with your community choir. But what I'm going to ask, and what I think sometimes we lose, is how do we push our teaching self to actually, I love this music that I'm singing, and maybe instead of just looking at okay, here's middle school music and I'll do it, how can I maybe search better this music and find a way to do it with the middle school choir? So an example could be, if you like this piece by X composer that writes a lot of high school music, maybe there are a few essay pieces or TV pieces that they do that aren't really popular or published, but how can you go and dig and find them? So I think it's about kind of asking those questions. One of the cool things as the music teacher, and a little different than other subjects, is that you hand out the textbook to your students every year. You hand out the textbook to your students. And it changes from year to year. So what, with yourself, where are you at? Where are you at in your own music maturity? What do you think is music that speaks to you right now that will more easily speak to your students? what's going on in society, what's something that you are passionate about. Because as we all know, music is a vehicle for society and for humanity. And so thinking about having the rapport with yourself to kind of ask those questions. What am I passionate about? What am I listening to? What stimulates me right now? And I think if you maybe take actual time to do that and really kind of do some soul searching, I think you might find more fruit than just kind of maybe going, okay, here's a pile of middle school music that I've never heard of, but let me just find what works. Not that that's not important, but just maybe think more about how can I find music that I'm passionate about, and how can I maybe curtail it to the students that I'm teaching.
Okay, we've seen this cartoon before, maybe? Yeah, so as you can see, not one size does not fit all. Obviously, the monkey seems like he's a lot happier about this than the rest of them. And so that whole idea of picking for the singers that you have is really hugely important. And what I found was a really healthy exercise was to actually write down the strengths and weaknesses of the group, and actually have it down on paper so that when you're looking at music, remembering, sometimes it's not hard to remember that you only have 2 tenors, but you know, things like that will make a difference in your selection of the repertoire. And those 2 tenors aren't really tenors, they're just baritones, right? So, and remembering that you're teaching class voice, and so not everything that you do will work for each individual student. You have the students who will get it and adapt to the technique immediately, and you have those students who you repeat the same things over and over again, and they still don't really quite understand what that jargon means, that choral jargon means. And then setting singers up for success. There's so much more, happy to actually get to a concert and say, okay, we've got our stuff memorized, things are good, we feel good about it, as opposed to, okay, I think we can do this, they're hanging on. And then the balance of the programming, and you all know this very well, you've got your really, really tough piece, and then maybe not so many other tough pieces as well. And instilling that type of growth, still challenging them, but really knowing where they're at is hugely important. And then tracking their independent skills and their corporate skills, and making sure that the proficiency level is moving somewhere, individually and corporately.
So then kind of going from you to your choir, your singers, and then how does that play out in the community? And this could be different. So I think with community, it's very easy to kind of think that it's a homogenous group. And we all know in the classroom that you have students that maybe on the surface they look the same, but underneath there's so many variables. And I think education is becoming better at kind of keeping everybody in play at this. And so I wanted to show this picture. This is the current church that I'm at right now in Washington, and it's really interesting. We have a sanctuary chorus of great old Presbyterians, but then we also at our church have a Kenyan Rwandan congregation, so a congregation from Rwanda that comes, and then we also have a modern worship team. So we have these 3 different kind of styles. In some ways 3 different cultures, but even from that, in the Rwandan church, there's people from Kenya, from the Congo. So anyway, it's very easy to remember not to make overtly stereotypes, or just thinking that, oh, well, they're all from Africa, so that's clearly the same country. It's a continent. But we make that mistake sometimes. And so I think it's not making assumptions, and then also the biggest thing too is language, which is different than dialect and which is different than culture. In the United States, there's a book called The Culture Map that I've been looking through, and I think when we look at the United States, we often think when we're talking about music that we're really talking about singing a lot, singing or instrumental music, but in so many other cultures, dance is such a huge element. And so anyway, when we kind of broaden our scope of what we do in the classroom with music, how can we think about in our community, which it'll be different everywhere, how can you broaden the scope of what music is? Not so much that it's just singing, but maybe dance is included, or different instruments that are appropriate. Maybe there's someone in the community, there's a guy in my church choir that plays bagpipes, and so anyway, that would be something that, knowing my demographic, that could be something I include, and there's a little more proximity to it because it's someone that we know. So what I wanted to do is I just wanted to show you one thing. I think that it's becoming easier to do as teachers, but so earlier in the year with my choir, I did a piece in South African. And so I went to talk to a few of the members from New Hope, which is what that congregation is called, and they said, really none of us speak South African. I'm like, okay, that makes sense. You're all from a different part of Africa. But anyway, they started sharing music with me. And so I'll just play a little quick snippet, hopefully the audio works, of a piece that they shared with me called Kumusaraba. We'll just see if it works. Maybe I'll do this. So this is a piece that everyone, I think in Rwanda at least knows. And so what I ended up doing, and I am a horrible arranger, so I will just say this, that if I can do this, you all can do this. But I pretty much, I looked online, I looked for the text, and I just kind of took melody, and I just kind of made a little piece of paper to hand out to my choir, because that's how they learn better. Culturally, Western choral musicians, we learn like this. And so, but this was a way that I thought, hey, this could be a win for us, because even though we are from two different parts of the world, this is how we can come together and make community. And I would just close talking about community. I can't remember the actor's name, but he was in the Black Panther, and he's been in Get Out and Us. I don't know the actor's name, but anyway, he was on Trevor Noah. If y'all watch Trevor Noah, and there was a quote that he said that I think is really amazing. He said that so many people try to be the popular singer, but he said what's more important is to sing the popular song. And that really hit me, because I think so often we think, well, I'm the teacher and I want to do this music because I think it's so important, so I'm going to do that. But if you think of what the popular song is in your community, what is the community asking for? What do they need? That's more important, I think, than always just being the popular singer. But how can you get a popular song? So.
Okay, so composers, as you can see, we have Rossetti Paul here working with a choir. As it's noted there, composers are people too. They have emails, they have Facebook, they have everything we do too. And so it's important to remember that they are human and they're not this, demigod up on the mountain. And they can help you out. Collaboration obviously is important. If you can get them into your classroom, it's huge, beneficial for you. Even a Skype session, most of them will maybe ask for a little fee, but not too much. Some will even do it for free. And then commissioning and consortiums. There's always consortiums going around where you just pay like $100 or $200 and you get this pretty big work. We did one a couple years ago at Onyate with Tim Takash, and we only paid $100 for the consortium and then another $100 to work with them for an hour on the piece. And it was a 7-movement secular winter cycle. It was a really cool work. And I think he did one choir from every state. So it's just kind of cool to see your program's name on a piece forever. And then finding composers who are active in the field, whether they're active on I'm a choir director, or they're active on just out there in the field. You see them at ACDA doing something. And just a quick aside, a lot of times we're finding nowadays that composers don't actually want their dates on a program. Some of them actually want to not, people not to know how old they are or how young they are. Because that kind of may determine who gets their music. So just a little aside, I often try to at least email the composer and figure out do you have a bio that you particularly like, or because just pulling one from the internet, it might not be the most recent one. And so that's just a quick thing. Some composers are getting a little bit not so happy about the whole date thing, but that's a whole other thing. So. We just came up with a list of 10. We're really thinking about middle school because a lot of us teach middle school. But we also like this quote: conductors cannot separate appropriate repertoire from vocal development. Good repertoire enhances and develops a beautiful tone quality. Bad repertoire undermines choral development. And we thought that was a really great quote. And just a quick list, I'm sure you recognize most of these names, if not all of them. And this is not a finite list, this is just a quick list of people who we definitely have used music from. And I believe, yeah, there's even an article in the Choral Journal which lists a lot of these composers and on what they think about when they write for middle school music, as well as the fact that many of them are in the trenches, you know, actually doing the work and finding that rep. So, you know, some of you are taking pictures. I'll give you 10 more seconds on that.
Yeah. Yeah, and this is obviously just a short list of, and I'm sure you know many other names, but yeah, as Ryan was saying, it's really cool when you look at a bio of some of them, and most of them are teachers. You know, they're teaching middle school, so they know exactly the kind of joys and frustrations of what can happen with the middle school voice and voice change. But then just to again reiterate the point that, again, they're teachers, you're teachers, you know, we can email, you know, it's not like, oh, well, Victor C. Johnson, he wrote this piece and he's, you know, this and I can't, you know, I don't want him to know that my choir sounds like, you know, but again, I think with social media, with just communication now, it's so much easier to really actually just have the dialogue and just to share that stuff with each other. So when you look at these three, maybe we said this, but again, all these really relate to one another. And just for the purpose of this session today, we're kind of selecting a few specific things just to kind of get the juices flowing. But again, as you know, a lot of this is this crosses over. So kind of to pair that middle school repertoire, or repertoire that's more for middle school, elementary voices, where we're going to head to next, which is Rigor. We're going to kind of take a look at kind of our choral Western canon, but hopefully from a perspective that has a little more meaning and a perspective where you can actually find something. So in an old session that I used to do, I would talk about this, and I had a picture. I just couldn't find a way to put it in, but it was a guy sitting in a library, dark, you know, shadow on him, and he's studying. And I talk about how I get so overwhelmed when I go to libraries because there's so many books. But anyway, it shows the guy in the corner, and then it zooms out, and like the library is like huge, and this guy's like that little. And the point of it is that that there's so much music out there. There's so much music out there. You know, when you look at even just in the past decade, how much new music has come about, which is awesome through commissions or consortiums. But then when you even go further back and you look at, well, what about music in the 19th and 21st century? What about music in the Baroque? What about classical? And so it's a vast library that we have, a vast repertoire. And to be frank, there's a lot of music, especially around here, that nobody does, or that even a lot of people don't really know about. And I think that there's some gems that I think we could find with that. And so I kind of throw this list up here, not saying that you need to go find a piece from the Secunda Practica, but just to kind of remember those music history days of like, yeah, music started here and then it became this and it became that, just to kind of give a little reminder of a little music history. But I think in each one of these periods, that there are in eras that there are things that we could find. So even starting like with antiquity and Renaissance, like what could be the gain of doing something like that with your choir? The two things that I think of right away is with polyphony. Again, you having independent lines that, you know, like the standard one I would think is like Secret Cherubs or something, where, you know, everyone kind of sings the same theme, but not always together. So how can you use that in your classroom and have a teaching moment with that? Well, you know, you all sing the same thing together, sing the soprano together, and you could work on tone, you could work on some musicality, some articulation stuff, and then you could bleed that into their own part. So again, how can you use some of this older music, not just saying, I'm just going to do a Renaissance piece because I know I should, but what's the gain from it? And the other genre that I would say that is in all of these are mass movements. So if you have your Kyrie, your Gloria, your Credo, Sanctus, and Agnus Dei, you know, when we talk about relevancy in a little bit, you ask, well, how is this music relevant to my students now? You know, and I think that's a big question that we should ask ourselves. How can we make this relevant? You know, I think, you know, masses, it's sacred, so maybe we can't do that in our school, but masses are also, they're weekly, they're ritualistic, they're something that we do even when we don't want to do it. So maybe how can we talk about what are rituals in your students' lives? What are daily activities that they do every day? And maybe how can you talk about the Kyrie, which is more somber. What's something in your day that's somber? Or a thing that I like to think about on Facebook, when you like things, you have like the thumbs up or the hearts. I think like the Kyrie, which is stern, that's like stern face. The glory, which is like, we like you, God, thumbs up. And then the credo, which is like, wow, God, that's the O face. And then the Sanctus, holy, holy, that's the love. And then Agnus Dei is the tear, because Lord help me. So, but again, I think there's ways to make similarities to like what's current, what's, and how to draw that into some of this great music. Going into the Baroque. So obviously you're not going to do your St. John Passion with your 9th grade treble choir, but what about some of the arias, or what about some of the solos that maybe could be excerpted and used as a solo piece, or maybe ones that you're just going to teach private voice to. So I think it's kind of, again, doing that digging and kind of searching, music that you may love, like you may have sung the Mozart Requiem or something in college, and you love that piece. How can you maybe find something, maybe not from that, but kind of that same style? And I think when you do a little more digging, that helps. And then, obviously the most probably current one to us is 19th, 21st century. Octavos, popular music, stuff that we see now. Again, just being very conscious of the music that you're picking. One of the cool things, when I was at Michigan State, they had a wonderful library and a wonderful choral literature sequence that sadly a lot of undergraduate programs don't have, or they're maybe not as full. There's not as much breadth to it. But again, just to go into a library and just to really sift through different things. You may see a piece by Mort Lordson that you love, but as you go further, you're like, oh, there's this one, I've never heard of this, or there's this one, Again, it just kind of opens it up a little more. And sometimes it's not even so much that you're going to do it, but you just know about it. And I think that's important, that you just, oh, okay, that there's actually this much by this person, or Bach's collected works are this. So again, I think it's just helpful to kind of pay a little time, just kind of searching through it and just looking a little further. And so this next little bullet point I just call arias for the middle school choir. So some of this I'm sure you've done, but just to kind of throw it in the air. Obviously 24 Italian songs and arias, we all know all of them by heart. But again, Caro mio bien, or another one that maybe isn't popular, like maybe you do that with your 9th grade treble choir. And you all learn it at the beginning of the year to really work on tone, or to really work on phrasing. I think there's a lot of these things that work for solo voice we can use for everyone. Art songs, same thing, or German lieder. Cantatas, as I was saying, Kriegslag and Todesbanden, which is BWV 4, one of Bach's more popular cantatas. There's a beautiful soprano and alto duet that, again, it's good music, and I think there's teaching tools that you can use in that, and share it with your choir. And again, find ways that it's not just this piece from long ago, but how can it be current in your life today. And these are just some things you can work on. Your choral tone, unison singing, which we all know is very important, but also difficult, sometimes more than parts. Language, just sense of ensemble, having a little history lesson with the stuff that you did. Folk music is another thing that kind of goes on another tangent in performance practice. So again, just kind of thinking about this music that it's been around for a while, how can you maybe do a little more soul searching and finding stuff that people aren't doing? And then here's just some choral literature text. So again, these are all like mostly your Western canon. Some of them are a little more updated, and they're looking at music from Europe or from Scandinavian stuff. So you'll get a little more new stuff. But again, these are just kind of staple texts that a lot of graduate programs use. But again, it's helpful to kind of sift through it and just see what's out there, or what's been out there, and that may not get performed as much anymore.
3, 2, 1. Okay, so we're going to limit the scope of relevancy to multicultural music today, because I feel like it is a really relevant avenue, and we only have so much time. So in terms of resources and where you can find this, obviously reading sessions, and I mean, you're doing it right by being here today. ACDA, going to concerts, going to your, even though it's all the way across town, 10 minutes, you can go to another person's concert. I know they all tend to line up at different times, but that's a great way to find stuff. And then, as you can see here, we're gonna list some publication resources. Like I mentioned, create a network with a colleague or 6. You've got people here. You can talk about pieces all the time. Brennan and I used to call each other like every Wednesday to, well, first off, kind of vent about how church choir went that night. And then it was just a good halfway point of, okay, my week has been crap or my week has been awesome. And how can it either get better, or how can I help, how can we help each other? What are the pieces that you're doing? It was just so helpful, and it felt so freeing to have somebody to vent to, and to just constantly, I mean, we send texts to each other all the time saying, hey, do you know this piece? And oftentimes we'll either know or we won't, and we'll say, great, I'm gonna use that next semester or something. So just to have that collegial resource.
Right, and it also, again, to kind of clear the air, what we haven't talked a little bit about, which is a great resource, but like YouTube, it's so easy to go on YouTube and, okay, I'm doing this song and I'm gonna now watch 10 different versions of it, and all, and usually they're by really great choirs. And again, when you can have more of a dialogue and say, I'm doing this piece, you're doing this piece, what are you doing with it? And even if it's very different, even if it's like totally different than anything anyone else does, how is it being relevant to your singers? How is it being relevant to where they're at? But then also, again, just to have that dialogue with a colleague, with someone that you can network with, and just kind of shoot ideas off of. Again, it makes the music just be alive. Music is, it can sit there, but until it comes alive is when it makes it special. And so it's just to have that conversation with someone rather than it just being this ethereal, out there land kind of thing.
Right, so if you look at the publication resources, we want to bring your attention to a couple of them. On the right-hand side there, you see the Justice Choir Songbook. I wanted to point out that is a free resource that you can download. It has, I think there's volume 1 and 2 now, so you can get that pretty easily. There's tons of songs on there, short songs, a lot of rounds, and they're all very, very relevant to social justice issues and what's going on. And the cool thing is that a bunch of composers basically got together and created these for this free songbook. So that's a great resource to have and just print out and see if there's anything you can use, especially at the beginning of the year. We use it as kind of a retreat builder at the beginning of the year, so that worked out well. Also, under GIA Music of the Taizé community, I just did an independent study on the music of Taizé, and I found, and the whole reason was because I'd only seen it used in a church setting. And I wondered if it could be used in a secular setting too. And I believe it can, especially with the ecumenical sense of it. I use it in my AP music theory class because oftentimes you have a whole array of musicians. You've got one oboe player, one singer, a trumpet player, and I mean, you can easily create, and it's great for that improvisational standard that we often have trouble finding things to do for. So I just want to point that out. A lot of the Taizé music is very accessible, very repetitive, and it's easy to find too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and there's so most of the language is either English or Latin, but there's immediacy with it. If you've sung that music before, at my church right now, we've been doing the same Taizé piece when we go into prayer. We've been doing it for about 6 months now, and there's still every Sunday where someone will come, oh, I really like that piece. We should do that more often. I'm like, we've been doing it for the past 6 months. But anyway, you're just noticing now. But anyway, there's something very immediate about it, and it's simple, or it can be simple, but it also finds a way, what we're not really going to go down, unless there's questions yet, but when we talk about programming, and really creating a diverse program, it doesn't always have to be 4-part music, to put a chant in, like I was saying earlier about in music from antiquity, put a chant in there, put something that has a few instruments with it, and just kind of keep a good, I was thinking eclectic program.
And NMMEA has a great blurb about sacred music in the public schools. If you search their website, there's a great blurb that I oftentimes put print and just have on my board in case the principal ever asked any questions about what I was doing there. And I think I was notorious for doing a lot of sacred stuff. Not because I felt that way, just because that's where a lot of great music is. There we go, there it is.
And then some other ones that just to point out, GIA, African American Church Music. So a lot of spirituals or gospel music on there, and mostly written by people that know that tradition or that from that tradition. You know, one thing it's always when you're looking at music, it's good to look at you know, what the style is and thinking who's writing it. Is it someone that actually knows this tradition, or are they just kind of creating a generic sound of that? So, but that's that GIA kind of series has a lot of really great stuff. And then we're starting to hear a lot more music from the Baltic regions, Estonia, Latvia. So Musica Baltica is a really popular website. Walton Music just came out with a series, Music of Estonia. So anyway, it's just kind of interesting to kind of broaden the scope of music that you're finding in language and all that kind of stuff.
And if you have specific questions as to, okay, what could I get on the Hop One U and Choral series, you can always email us and ask, what have you used from this particular thing? Because these are ones that we thought we've picked music from these particular publications. Okay, so we thought it was also important to mention it's a great thing to seek out commissioned music written by marginalized or underrepresented populations in order to diversify your program and diversify. I mean, your choirs we're getting more and more diverse every day. ACDA, the Diversity Initiative, is doing a great job of trying to get everybody on the same page with this, and so empowering the few is basically the idea that we're getting at here. And so if you can try to make it a habit to actually just think, okay, looking at my program, what have I picked so far? Am I representing these people? What does it look like, the makeup of the composers of my program? Okay, how many of you have heard of the Global Jukebox project? So, yes, so this is a wonderful, wonderful resource that is free, developed by Alan Lomax and now run by his family. I'm going to try to show you really quick here where it's at. So if you go to culturalequity.org is the website, and it'll take you here. You can also Google Global Jukebox, but it'll take you here. You move on down the page to experience the Global Jukebox. Oh my goodness, it works. And you don't need an account, you just enter as a guest. I love this website because you can go over here to explore the map and enter the jukebox map. Let's go to Fair Ireland, maybe. Let's see what's going on here in Dublin. Oh, and I'm gonna move the page.
As I walk through Dublin city at the hour of 12 at night, who should I see but a maiden beauty, combing her hair with a four-pronged pike? Tarry-diddle-I-do-day-do-day-do, tarry-diddle-I-do-day-do-day, tarry-diddle-I-do-day-do-day-do, tarry-diddle-I-do-day-do-day. As I walked again through Dublin on the same or another night, who should I see but the same fair maiden, counting her cash by the candlelight?
So, as you can see, you can listen to places from around the world, and what's really cool, we listened to a few, with all the things happening in Iran, we went to, Iran on the map and listened to some things there. There's like a funeral song for a girl that's listed on there, and you can go all around the world and just kind of pick authentic music from that particular region. And what's really nice about it too is they have what they call metrics, different ways of measuring the song, but also different ways of measuring the movements, and it tells you what movements are happening when. And another thing I wanted to point out about this, if you go up to the top, let's see here, explore the map. This is not getting this far away. Okay. There is a place, as you can see, there's many places, and they're constantly adding places around. So if you're doing a piece from whatever country, you can say, okay, what other music is happening here? What I love too is there's a thing called journeys here. So if you want to take a look at Jewish music here, it gives you kind of a whole, not necessarily a lesson, but you could use it as a lesson. It gives you the background, gives you maps, gives you different ideas and actual photos of that time, paintings. There's just so much you can do. It's a very cross-curricular thing that we've got here. And so just a thing that I want to point out, you can toy around with this and explore it, but it is free and it's kind of a cool thing to do.
Yeah, and I would say, think about sometimes like when you're in rehearsal and you're doing a piece and you're just like, how can I just make it better? Or what am I missing? Like I keep saying the same thing, but it always kind of seems stagnant. I think to have resources like that, if you're doing a piece from Ireland, maybe it's not that piece, but what are some things you can maybe gain or that your students could hear by having them listen to something? Like if you're doing a piece from that area, what would be a couple things you'd say that you can maybe, what's that?
You're the dialect, the language.
Exactly, the language, the dialect, right? In the tonality, right, yeah. And just the singing style, I think we're, granted, when, you want to teach good, healthy singing, that's priority number one, but really the voice is such a flexible thing, and from different places, and so it helps. Or if you just want to spend, 30 minutes, just kind of giving background, that's a very helpful website. And I think too, it's something that when I was teaching high school, I often missed. I always, we need to rehearse some music, I often missed that piece of it. And I think that's even more important. I think it's important to give that website to your students and see what they come up with, So just last night, this was really interesting. We were coming back from a restaurant, and the Uber driver that we got in the car, and we started hearing the music, and we're like, this is kind of interesting and cool, but we didn't want to say anything, and the driver said that it's Tuvan throat singing that he was listening to, and like we're both like jamming out to it because we're choral nerds, whatever, and so he just asked like, what are you here for? We're music teachers at a conference, and he just started going off on like how he's like been on this kick of listening to music from different again, who would have thought, right? But there's something so earthy and so human, I think, when we kind of explore music from other places, or even if it's folk music from Appalachia, there's a different quality there. There's a different quality here in the Southwest than there is in the Pacific North. So anyway, it's just, I think it's helpful to kind of get your ears moving, and kind of putting those feelers out for, it could actually be done a little differently, or I like that tune, so we'll just sing the melody. A really great website, just to kind of throw out your students, I think.
My favorite quote of the night. Y'all like throat singing?
Yeah.
Okay. So, just want to go through the bullet points here underneath under preparing. Really some thoughtful considerations of how do I think about this, how do I take it, why are we learning the piece, what is the background and cultural context, why should I share it with my choir, will the piece actually enrich the lives of my students, what is the purpose of sharing this music? So often we go on our music libraries and we think, this is teachable, here we go. And just really asking those questions about why are we doing this? What is the most authentic way to teach translation pronunciation? Remembering that language and dialect are two different things. You have to decipher a new notational system. If IPA is included, can you find a native speaker to assist in your community as well? Are there auxiliary instruments involved? Is the percussion you add culturally and musical appropriate? Because a djembe doesn't work for everything. Do your research. Have you ever picked up music while you travel? Or, if you're not traveling all the time, you might know people who do and say, hey, you're going to Greece this summer. Why don't you just see if you can find me some music, wherever you go. New vocal timbres to consider. And teaching by rote making the pieces kind of more authentic in some cultures. Also, is there money involved in the process? Can the composer or culture of origin benefit monetarily from our performance? Oftentimes, it seems like it's just ripping their music out and then using it and for ourselves. Is there a way we can, give back? Adding choreography or choreography, but ensuring that it's tasteful and appropriate and to the meaning of the text. Is it actually helping? And is it actually helping the singing too?
Yeah, and I know I'll say I've seen a few performances of kind of a South African piece or whatever, and there's the the stereotypical dance section. And it's cool, like the whole choir like breaks out in the wobble or like whatever, And it's cool to see, but I'm thinking, okay, is this really appropriate? And so again, it's try not to go for the cheap. Yeah, that's cool, but like again, what's appropriate? What are they actually singing about?
Your students love getting off the risers, and it's a great way to stage it. And from a adjudicator standpoint too, it's something nice to see every once in a while as the kids actually come off the risers and do something that's meaningful or that looks kind of visually pleasing. Do I have permission to share this music? Is it appropriate to share the piece in a new context? And then musical analysis is just talking about the elements of ensemble. Also be careful what you select. Are the composers in question authorities in that particular area of music? We often see, arranged by, and maybe we don't want to do arranged by, but actually just do the real thing. Also, does it say in the style of? In the style of a Mexican huapango? Well, why don't we, just find a Mexican huapango to do?
And then in programming multicultural music, as we've just been talking about, like that website, I mean, I think to think more cross-curricularly, maybe work with a history teacher, or maybe if you have a German teacher or a French teacher, again, incorporate them, and the students love it when they see teachers working together and maybe to make kind of a unit out of something. It just becomes a stronger connection for the students, and something that means something more. Play recordings for your students, as we just talked about, and play, even if it's not multicultural music, but just different recordings of Western classical music, or of a song on Pitch Perfect that you're doing, or Glee. How is this one a cappella choir doing it, and how is this a cappella choir doing it? And just to kind of have your students hear, because I think often we really expect them to sing away, but it's like, but they've never heard any way. They've never heard other people doing that. And so I think just to give them more ammunition to kind of know what they're capable of. Find conductors and composers who are actively commissioning multicultural music. A couple of really cool rabbit holes you could go down. I believe on YouTube especially, you can either look at World Choir Games, which has choirs from all around the world, or there's a lot of international choir competitions that are held like in Scandinavia or Eastern Europe, and there's sometimes American choirs, but then a lot of international choirs, and just to hear different repertoire. Sometimes it's easy to find that music, sometimes it's very difficult to find it. But again, just to kind of hear different singing styles, get some new repertoire, and I often think that how cool it is to be the first choir to do that piece here. It's so easy to want to like, I love Flight Song. All the choirs are doing Flight Song. And that's fine, but maybe do another piece that people don't know, and kind of give it a premiere here in the United States.
Writing the program notes is a very healthy thing to do, even if it's not just for the parents, for the students. A few weeks before the concert, letting them know why we're singing this music. And of course, healthy diet is all vegetables or all dessert, as we've come to find out as we're getting a little bit older. Thus, your program should never just be all Messiah one semester and all Disney the next. We've got to vary it just a little bit. And then what's the purpose of introducing the piece? If you're just saying, it's teachable, fun, easy, catchy, you might not be strong enough. I found that it was really, really easy to sell the piece if I was excited about it before I even handed it out. If you really, you got to sell it before it's even in their hands. And then, of course, music you always want to conduct, as well as music you sing in college, might not be the best thing to do all the time, but really reflect and consider the purpose. And then, how do I acquire more? Emailing, we already mentioned that. Putting the time in doing the research. Everybody's busy, you know this. We're all busy. Do the work, pick out meaningful music. It is, after all, your textbook and your job. So, get it done there. Publishing websites, we talked about composer newsletters. Elaine Hagenberg has a great newsletter that she's constantly sending emails out. We were talking about attending conferences, taking notes, hoarding all the information for later, which I did, and I don't regret bringing it all to New York, but it was a lot of boxes. And all state lists from different states are a great thing. Georgia has a great list, Minnesota has a great list, Colorado, different states, and seeing what they're doing, because they all have records of who's what's been done and who done it. And finally, any questions? All right, well, we'll be here in the front for a couple more minutes. Thank you so much for coming out for our conference.
And I have some certificates of appreciation for them, but I'm awkwardly in the back row. So here you go. Thank you guys.